Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the April 2026 session for the Central Ohio.NET Developers Group, or CONDG. Today we have all the way from Louisville, Kentucky, our good friend Chad Green with What If Your AI Could Be a Team? Reminder for those of you that are here in the room, if you're connected to the Wi-Fi, make sure that you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing, so that our speaker does not have any issues when he is doing his presentation. Most of you have been here a few times, so you know that we are on Meetup. But if you're online or you've never been here, you can find all our sessions there. We meet on the fourth Thursday from January to October. So November, December, obviously, it doesn't really work that well with our dates, but rest of the year, you can find us here. The organizing team, Alan, Matt, and myself. If you are interested in getting involved with the group, come talk to us after the session if you're interested to help. So again, we have chat today. Next month we have open. So if you're interested on speaking, again, come talk to Alan, Matt, or myself if you are interested. Looks like we're going to have Alan on June with creating VS Code extensions. And then July, we usually have lightning talks, so that's another opportunity for anyone interested. If you just want to do a quick presentation about something that you're excited about, that is perfect. But again, if you're interested in doing a full-length session, come talk to us. We also have a YouTube channel, so this session is being streamed and it's also going to be recorded. So if you missed any of these sessions earlier in the year and you're interested in them, you can go to the YouTube channel. We are up to 360 subscribers, so a lot of people very interested. Yeah. Go check all the recordings. There's a lot of really interesting sessions there. We still have an account in Twitter or X, however you call it. I don't think we post there that often, but you can follow us there. We also have a LinkedIn group that if you're interested, you can join. In our Discord server, so again, we post announcements for the sessions, and we talk about the .NET stuff in there.
Use the link, not the QR code. I need to replace the QR code.
Okay. There you go. So for those of you, if you didn't hear it, use the link. We can replace that QR code. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Central, for providing us the space where we meet, and also the .NET Foundation for paying all the meetup dues and some other fees that are involved with keeping this group alive. So thank you so much for the support. And again, Surgery is coming up next week. I think there's still tickets available, although you don't get the box anymore. And then for those of you that are not familiar with the event, it's a really cool conference that takes place at a movie theater. There's usually a movie or a new movie coming up around that time, but this year, since there's nothing coming around that week, we're gonna have 8 different movies for you to pick. Anything from The Last Starfighter, Inception, Interstellar. There's gonna be a little bit of everything for you to choose. And like I said, tickets are still on sale. You can use that QR code to go get your tickets. And last but not least, anyone in the room that is hiring, raise your hand. So if anyone is looking for a job in the room, go talk to those gentlemen. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Chad. Thanks again for being here. And switch it over.
All right, so this all worked before, so we'll see if it works again.
You got me in there?
I got you. Great. All right. Yeah, just trying to figure out where the camera's at. So first, thanks for having me. Sure enough, I saw Sam back in March, and I was like, hey, I've got a talk idea that I'm really interested in. Basically, I found out about Squad the end of February. Literally just talking to someone. He's like, "Hey, have you heard of Squad?" And of course, I thought I was missing out. It had been out for like 2 weeks at that point, so it was still really new. But as everyone knows, at my office, like I'm addicted to Squad now, and it's like the solution to everything. Not really, but but I really have found it to really help, and that's why I want to do this kind of talk. Let's see. There we go. So I see several faces I've seen before, but probably faces who don't know me. So my name is Chad Green. As Sam was saying, I come up from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the senior system architect at a company called Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Unless you are, if you're an older NASCAR fan, you know who Jasper is. Otherwise, you wouldn't know Jasper. We're a pretty good sized company. We're based out of Jasper, Indiana. If you know Santa Claus land, yeah, go east instead of west, and that's where Jasper is at. Most people have no idea what I'm saying when I say Santa. Everyone's like Santa Claus land, but. And then sure enough, I do quite a bit of stuff, to include like I run the Louisville.net group and so forth. All right, come on, there we go. So quick poll. So how many folks are using GitHub Copilot today? All right, so most everyone. Great. So it's interesting. I gave this presentation last week, and it was like mostly none. So how many have used the CLI? All right, so we're gonna go through a little bit quicker on some things here. How many of folks have used an AI team? Have used like the Fleet Command or Squad? All right, great. And that's what we're here for tonight, is that last one. So, because hopefully by the end you know how to do this. So the way how I built this talk was, again, I'm gonna go through some of these first parts really quick because I think everyone raised their hand for using GitHub Copilot. But I'm just going to go right to the demo. The whole idea, I could be in here and I could say, let me make that bigger. Of course, now I can't see anything. Oh, and I'm sorry, I always forget. I'm still trying to get used to using Visual Studio Code for.
Of course, there's an update.
You control P and then type in themes.
That's where I actually meant to go to. Forever and a day, I use Visual Studio for my presentations. I always do to switch it. I just don't think about it sometimes. All right. So anyway, I can start off with like, and because I've done it enough times, it even knows I'm going to do it, right? That's a little bit too spooky. Actually, it's kind of a weird thing. Sometimes it's just spooky that it knows you want to do. But again, the simple things we get with Copilot, right? Just the idea of those completions, right? It generally you're supposed to start saying 2 and then it'll start typing out, but it gets ideas, right? I could do stuff. And I'm not going to do it because again, most everyone's seen it. But I could say like, add a method to mark the task complete, right? And I think most everyone. Oops, I already clicked. See, I'm just in the habit of clicking the enter. But that. That'll take a moment, but then it'll add that method, right? So I think most everyone is used to that. But again, you've got this whole thing. You've got everything right here. You get. What? See, it went faster this time because I said it slow. It went fast. But again, just easier things. Obviously, are you going to waste time having an agent, type up a simple method like that? No. Well, think about where, hey, I needed to do all these different things, Of course, that's where plans really come into play when you really want to do a complicated thing. Tell it, this is all what I want to do. Switch this to the plan mode, which is actually an agent. And then it'll come up with a plan, which will make it better, much more organized. So, that's GitHub Copilot real quickly. So like I said, I'm going to skip through that part. But the one thing here, though. That's only in the editor, right? It's limited to that until I get to the next section, right? Now the editor can be VS Code, Visual Studio, JetBrains, but that in itself is just that. And I need to add a slide for this. One thing I always want to mention. So when I talk about GitHub or when I talk about Copilot for tonight, unless I say something different, I'm talking about GitHub Copilot. The joy of Microsoft and naming. Anyone around when .NET came out and everything was going to be .NET? Yeah. Well, I mean, it literally was going to be SQL Server.NET, Windows Server.NET, and all this kind of stuff. That was a fun day. And now, of course, everything's Copilot. But
Chad, a couple years ago, we had Scott Hansman speak here, and he said he wants to speak about Copilot. We said, great, but we didn't know which Copilot he was going to talk about. So
and that's the hard part, because I mean, and sure enough, I mean, I sometimes get calls with consultants, and I'm like, oh, well, I was having trouble with Copilot. And they're like, oh, well, that's because Copilot's not that good. I'm like, no. I'm talking about GitHub Copilot, using Claude and all this good stuff, right? But yeah, so sure enough, it lives in the editor. It has a single context window, right? I mean, I can only provide it, and one of the things that people will complain about this is that it is limited to what the editor sees, right? Sort of, right? Actually, you can put in commands and say, hey, go read this directory, and it will do that, right? But by its very nature, it's and that's it by intent, right? Usually when I hear complaints about like Copilot versus Claude code, that's usually the complaint I hear. Oh, well, Claude code is not restricted. I'm like, well, that's because GitHub actually made a distinctive choice. But it is one suggestion at a time, right? I mean, I am only able to do one thing at a time with it. Now, again, do a plan and it'll kick off a bunch of things, but it's still working one at a time. But, so what about the terminal, right? Now, of course, it's funny. I still remember 15, 20 years ago and talking to my system admin folks, and they complained because there weren't enough, terminal tools, and they had to use window tools. And I'm like, you know what? That's what I developed for, is for window tools. And now we all love the terminals again, right? And, because what if we need Copilot outside there? What if we don't want to open up the editor, right? Actually, nowadays, I spend more time using Copilot CLI, so in the terminal, than I do inside of Visual Studio, of any of the Visual Studios. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So this kind of sneakily came up last September. I didn't even hear about it until February. So it wasn't very well advertised. I think it's getting better advertising now because it's getting really useful. I will say it's not unusual for multiple updates in a day. I bet you I'll have an update today. It's because I haven't been on this computer in Copilot, so we'll see. But it's adding Copilot into the terminal, like I was saying. So it's giving a more natural flow, especially for more technical folks like us, right? And if we look at some simple commands, right? I can just generate commands. I can do explanations and get everything I need in there. So here. So if I go in here, and sure enough, I am in that bigger also. Now I am in PowerShell. Doesn't matter whether you're in PowerShell. Actually, I'm using Microsoft Terminal. I just have it set to automatically go into PowerShell. That has nothing to do with it. You can do this in regular command line too. But so I've already installed it, so I can type in Copilot, and I almost always do YOLO. Be careful with YOLO because it will just do anything it wants. But once you get used to it and you know what you're going to be doing, then YOLO makes a lot of sense. Actually, when I was presenting this last week,
for the benefit of the room, what does YOLO do?
I was just about to say, yeah. So because sure enough, people were asking the same question, right? And I was like, well, so YOLO, you only live once, right? Or dangerous mode, right? It's the idea that you're telling, so without it, so I will get this because it's the first time I've gone into Copilot in this folder. But anything it had to do, if it needed to read a file, needed to write a file, do other transactions, it would ask me, can I do this? Can I do this? And it gets really annoying. To the point, actually, last week, they were like, oh, try it without that. And so we did. And they were, oh, yeah, you're right. Stop that, right? It's, So I'm just going to allow that. So here I am. I'm in there. And I'm shocked there is no update. Microsoft would have failed me today. I mean, I really am shocked. I mean, I literally sometimes see multiples in one day. But I'm in here, right? And so, bigger. Sorry. There we go. But we can see here. So I'm just in a regular folder. Notice it says no instruction found. we'll talk about that here in a moment. But you see I'm in my folder. You see that I've got the one MCP server is the GitHub MCP server, MCP being model context protocol. Basically, it's server is kind of a bad name for the text files. But basically what it is telling Copilot or Claude or what have you, hey, here's how you do these things, right? If you want to, if you want to write a lucid diagram, there's a lucid MCP, and it'll give that instructions, right? And then I have 4 skills that are just loaded. We'll talk about skills in a couple minutes. So, if we were just to see what we could simply do in here. So, we could do simple things like, now, I've opened up the wrong folder in my cheat. I opened up the wrong cheat folder. Hold on 1 second. Oh. So I have everything in my repos except for all my presentations that I keep in presentations. It would help if I go to the presentations folder. All right. So now, I could do things. Well, first off, so one of the big things about Copilot, as opposed to using stuff like Cloud Code or Cursor or what have you, is, Copilot, its biggest advantage is that it's an orchestrator, right? And it can use a lot of different models, right? So here you can see I've got several GGPs, I've got Claude Sonnet, Opus, Haiku. So there's several different in here. There are now some that are blocked. I will say the list you see will depend on what type of Copilot account you have. So I am on a individual Pro Plus. All right. So for example, you see I have Opus 4.7. You won't have that if you just have individual Pro.
Like a recent question for you.
Yeah.
Is there any way, if you're on 4.6, is there any way to get back to if you're on Pro Plus, is there any way to get back to 4.6?
I have not figured that out because it just happened like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I know.
And I haven't had a chance to go look.
It takes me off.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I know why some of these things have happened, and I still can't say everything because a lot of it's still NDA. And even the way how they did this is not the way how they told us back in March of what they were going to do. So here's, and the funny thing, and when I say they told us stuff. So as an MVP, we get to go to the MVP Summit, which was back in March. I feel like that was a long time ago. It was last month. That's why I keep my ears back in March, and I just saw that's last month. It's been a long month.
Yeah, I know.
But it was funny because even a couple weeks prior to that, I was saying there's no way they can continue to, because the current model, and they're in the middle of switching right now for individuals, is you pay for request, right? And a Pro subscription gets 300 requests, a Pro Plus gets 300 or 1,500 requests per month, right? And what is a request? A request could be a lot of things. It's basically every time I send a prompt, not a completion, right? So if I'm in like Visual Studio Code, completion doesn't count. But every time I send a prompt, so like before when I said, hey, add that method, that was a request. And that's where we see these, 1x, 0.33x, right? That's how much of a request for each one of those. Which is why a lot of times I actually will use, and you see it's even my default, right? I use Haiku a lot. Because for just regular prompts, Haiku makes a lot of sense, and I only charge a third of a request. Especially from a work where at work, we've got a regular team account, so I have 300 requests a month, right? And sure enough, this is where it gets weird, because if so I just looked at this. Now watch it, it's changed since I did this. But if I look at my Copilot account, I'm still on the request because I know because it still says 4.1%. Only because I've been doing a lot of work stuff. But they're in the middle of switching us over for the individual accounts from premium request to tokens. So very much like how Claude Code is charged. But at least at this point, the corporate accounts are still on premium request. So, but I did want to show the models. Again, I'm going to stick with Haiku. But I want to say one other thing with the models though. At least while you are on a corporate account or still on the individual with the current one, here. So like there's also like GTP5 Mini 0 request, right? So if I'm doing just pure automation, I'll switch to that, right? If I'm telling it, hey, go through and reorganize these folders and all that kind of stuff, I don't need Claude or whatever, right? I mean, so why pay for a request? All right, but here, we could do things like I could say, create a new, .NET app. So give it very basic things, and think there for a second, and you can see it's doing the syncing, and there you go. So it's going to start asking me questions, right? Because I only said create a .NET app. Well, of course, we all know there's a lot of different type of .NET apps. We'll just stick with we'll stick with this. So I can create a console app. I can say, the Kong app. I can pick the framework. Now, that's interesting. .NET 8 seems, here's one of the interesting things you get with frameworks. It's only advertising .NET 8, .NET 10's out, right? So I could say .NET 10. So, and then now it'll create that folder because it's got some smarts to know what to do on there and so forth. And there you go. I now have a project. If we were to, no, because I switched to light mode. Now if I was to switch over to that folder, we can see that it created, yes. We can see that it created a very simple, I wasn't even sure what it was going to do, but it created a very simple folder or console app, right? So, really nice. So one of the things also that we don't normally think about is, I talked about there's different kinds of copilots. Well, the other fun part about writing instructions is like every time I do this, AI will do something different for me, right? But we always think of doing agent type things and having to trigger off work. But we can also use it to ask questions, right, and do promptings. So I can go in here, because I don't know about y'all, but I don't know Git, right? Visual Studio is really good at knowing Git. I just let it do everything. But explain to me what this means, right? I can ask it that question, and give it a moment, and it'll give me a good explanation of what the git rebase command is, right? And sure, I use this a lot. Actually, so as an architect, I spend most of my time doing brainstorming, writing documents, writing diagrams and so forth. I'm in here all day long, prompting and having it help me generate all my documents and such. So the one other thing I wanted to show real quick is this is kind of, especially now that we're going to a token-based system. If I do exit out of here, you'll notice while we're still on request charges, and again, if you're in the corporate accounts, it still will. It tells me how many requests I used, right? So you can see I used 0.66 request. But also now that we're going to a more token-based system, GitHub does tell you that information. So it's really nice. Granted, it's telling you after the fact, right? But at least I can kind of tell some things. The other interesting part, notice that it's got this resume in here. So this is really nice. So if I was to copy that, paste it in there, I'm not going to worry about YOLO. I'm right back where I was, right? And here's where, because I didn't turn on YOLO, I'm getting prompts of questions, right?
So this is kind of like finding that chat in the side pane.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. And this is, again, really nice because, I don't finish everything in one sitting, right? And it's actually the point that I, of course, as all my notepads open up, I generally have a list of different sessions that I'm working through. Now, with that being said, you actually can find, when you're in the folder, you can find them, and it does list them out there for you. But I just make it easy. I can quickly go to whatever folder I was working with.
You can also name a session, so it has a more human readable name instead of just the GUID ID.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Now I will try that out.
I think it's just / rename, but
No, I'm definitely going to make note of that because that would definitely make my life easier. All right. So, so really nice, a little bit easier to use, especially again, if you're more technical, but, it's still reactive, right? You still ask for a command, Copilot suggests, you run it, but what if we could do it without it asking, and that's where agents come into play, all right? So this is kind of taking, AI to the next extreme, right? So if we think about it, chat mode, right? You're driving, you ask, you get advice, you decide and so forth, right? But in agent mode, they're driving, right? You give them a job, you tell them what they need to do, and then they execute. So they'll read files, they'll read commands, write code, edit, iterate on errors, right? So, again, we can see this, right? Comparatively, right? Execution, you're running it, whereas the agent runs it. Commands suggest only, but it'll execute, right? So a lot more nicer, right? And so if we see the general workflow of an agent, again, I'll give it, hey, here's what I need to do, and he'll start doing a plan of some sorts, right? Does depend on the agent, does depend on the, what exactly your prompt was. And then it'll start acting nice, writing, editing files. It'll test and check for errors. And then, it'll try to fix those errors and retry. And it continues this process, right? And until you're done, or until the limit's reached. That's happening a little more often right now. Again, AI is the victim of its own success right now. So I realize this is kind of repeating the same thing. But again, we can see it because we're not having to do so many steps, right? We can get it quicker is what I'm trying to show here. So, so what do agents look like? Well, here's the funny thing. They're just text files. So here is the GitHub Copilot awesome repo. This is a very good repo to use because it's got a lot of agents, instructions, skills, so forth, right? So like if I was to go to the agents, I can, we can see a long list of agents we can use, right? With information about them. And again, I could click in here and I can see more information about this. This is the agent right here. This text you see, that's actually what an agent is, all right? So I'm saying, hey, you're an accessibility, it's an accessibility expert, all right? You're a world-class expert in web accessibility, blah, blah, blah. Here's your expertise, your approach, the guidelines you follow, different type of things you would do. And again, you write these up for what you're working on. It is interesting when I was doing this last week. So one of the people who normally attends at a Louisville event, she's actually one of the GitHub accessibility people. She actually helped write this agent. So that was kind of fun. But so how can we use this? Well, let me get in the right folder on here just to make this a little bit simpler for it to go. So, yes. So here you go. I've just got a folder. It's got a Razor file, right? Nothing special in here whatsoever. All right. So, and I'm going to go back to make this easier. And on my agents page, I'm going to go to my accessibility expert and I'm going to say install. I'm going to say open. Yeah, it's going to give me a nice little warning. Didn't even bother reading the warning. I've read it so many times. You get a choice of where you're going to put this agent. All right. So the .GitHub agents is your normal place to put that. That is within the repo you're working on. So it's, and here's the whole thing. That means it gets checked in with your repo. All right. So other people who get to the repo can use this. You do notice because I have a Claude installed, so you see I've got Claude agents. You can also put it into your root folders. And so if you want these agents to be usable on all your other projects, that's where you put it in. I generally do put it in my repo folders so that I always know anyone else who picks up that folder has it. So here we go. We've got that, and again, it's just a text file. Within, I don't know why it's because it wants to overanalyze files that are in there. But so now we've got that in here, and so we could say things like, just going to get to where that was. So if I go here, let's get that out of the way. So make this one a little bigger. And I could do this inside CLI or in here, but just so it's all graphical, we can see in here. So using this repo's instructions, refactor this null API. Nope, that's the wrong prompt. I'm glad I read that out. Okay, say that won't make sense for an accessibility expert. Here we go. Review this Razor component, and basically fix it, right? Give it so it's got usable by keyboard users, screen readers, and so forth, right? So we'll click on this. This does take a moment, but this will actually go here. Notice, so it's starting up MCP service. It's going to the Foundry MCP. You'll see that we don't have that, so it's fine. It just keeps on going, all right? But now it's already reading the things. It's analyzing everything. It's evaluating. This is the part I was talking about. It's making a plan. It's actually it's analyzing it, and there you go. It's made its plan. It's done all its changes. And one of the things I do like and don't like at the same time is so I've got the red and greens, right? So I can see what did it change, right? Now the reason why I say I do and don't like this is half the time it gets so intermixed. Like I mean, it's hard to follow sometimes. This one was actually not so bad. We can just mark it keep, right? And so now we can see we've got a much nicer, file, all right? And we can even see because we told it to tell us what it did. It gives us, information about what it did, what else fixed, even fixed a misleading default message by starting with no status text, right? So it's really interesting what this can do. Again, like I say, if we look in here, there's all kinds of agents, all right? And the nice part is, there's actually, one second, I'll come to you. There's actually, commands with inside, Visual Studio and Claude and so forth to create an agent based upon what you've been doing. Yes?
Did it tell you that it was using an agent?
Yes. Or usually does. You know what, actually, I just realized I did that and I did not. I forgot to switch the agent. So that was just regular Copilot did it. Copilot's pretty smart too.
Yeah. Okay, so that was going to be my question, is how do you know it was Copilot versus using your actual agent? And I guess A, but that's...
So now you got my curiosity. Because I was pretty sure...
Sid did it to me last week. I was doing a demo and I went to do it again and it said, hey, you already had me do this. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I did the last time.
So yeah, I was trying to remember. Again, like I said, I've been using the CLI so much more. CLI does tell you because you'll see it firing off that agent. And here it's not. I couldn't remember if it did or not. But I did this time. Well, other than the fact, I mean,
Right, yeah.
it does say right there. I just got too fast. I just realized I didn't plug in.
Fine.
Oh. The one thing I learned, these Surface laptops are very power efficient, except when they're displaying in multiple monitors. Yeah. So I mean, so that's an agent, right? But now how do we get to some more information, right? And that's where, we get to instructions and skills. And I'm just going to make it easier, not going back and forth, right? So, and again, so providing even more information, and whether this be the default agent, that's built in, or using one of these other agents, we can also do these instruction files. Like here, I mean, this is actually showing an example of the Copilot instructions file, right? Where it's got coding standards and it's got architecture. We're using minimal APIs for controllers and so forth, right? So that's where we start getting some really nice information. Again, if we go in here, we can see there's lots of instructions here, and there's other sites that provide instructions. I'm just using this one because it makes it a little bit easier to do it. But again, we can see lots of different types of instructions. And here's the thing, again, you can type up your own instructions, all right? So I mentioned that I do a lot of architectural documentation and such, and we have actually, we've taken all of our different files we write, we've templatized them, we've created agent instructions for every single one of them, and the real key part is we've also created examples for them because they still will go wild. But if you have an example, it actually works a whole lot better. But again, if I was to go into this, not that I would ever do, nothing wrong with that with Maui, but not that I would ever do anything with Maui. But here, this is instructions of what to do for Maui, right? And again, it's just another type of text file. One of the really important parts, though, in here, we can see there's apply, all right? So you can see I'm telling it to use this instruction when we're working on an example file, all right? And these can actually be pretty literate, right? So like one of the documents we work on are process flows, and I literally tell it when in the doc/process flows folder, use this instruction, right? And then I don't have to give it that information. So if we were to kind of look at the way how this goes. So again, I'm gonna swap over real quick. So in here, I've got a very simple minimal API. This is about the only time you'll ever see me write minimal APIs. I'm not a fan of minimal APIs, but they are great for demos. But so we've got a very simple minimal API, and again, we could do some nice instructions with it here. So, trying to remember which one I told it to do. The REST API development. So, like if I was to go back in here, and now we're going to install this instruction. Yes. And again, it's just another file within my repo, all right? And now I can do things. I really need to make my demo instructions easier to find things. Install that. Oh, that's right. I had do a skill also. So that's an instruction file, but there's also skills. So instructions provide detailed instructions. Skills kind of like give it some more smarts. All right. So again, here we'll see skills. And notice that these are a little bit more detailed, more specific, right? Agent governance, OAuth compliance, right? So getting a little more detailed in what we're talking about. Trying to remember which skill I said I was going to use.
So how does this work for like context? So let's say I pasted in like 50 agent files.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that's not going over the question. Like how does that?
No, okay, I actually get where you're getting at. So, sorry, we've been talking about agents, we've been talking about instructions, and we've been talking about skills, right? So, and the answer is going to vary slightly based upon those three. So, first off, so an agent, up until what I'm about to talk about, you work on one agent at a time, right? And I'm literally, I'm going in here, once I find my mouse, I'm literally going in here and saying, I'm picking an agent. To include, agent is an agent, it's just a Copilot. Those top three are agents, but then I also have other agents that I have installed on my machine, right? So I'm working one at a time with those. Now I'm going to get to how we can coordinate with multiple agents. So those are one at a time. If we look at like an instruction, again, this is what I was talking about, like in here it applies to, right? So it's applying to those files. And what will actually happen is it will, in your prompt, this is why you gotta be careful how many instructions you put into a folder. It will load those in. And again, especially now that we're going to this, token-based pricing, the more I put in, the more tokens I'm using for that request. So it's definitely something you want to think about. Didn't really have to think about too much with the premium request model, as long as they all fit within 200,000 skills, or with those. The skills get a little bit differently, because in here I'm usually calling out the skills, all right? Because again, I'll just pick on this one. Notice that, I'm just giving a name. So I usually will say, use the OAuth skill or what have you. But also Copilot will actually look at the list of skills you have, and they will try to pick the right skills. So it uses a little bit of intelligence up front.
One thing you'll say in the skills is use this skill if, and it's a good fit, and it kind of teases the agent to figure out when you want to use this particular skill.
And one of the things here you see me doing 1 or 2 sentence prompts. Honestly, a lot of my prompts, actually, I'm known for writing epic prompts because I put a lot of details in my prompts, right? I'm giving very specific instructions. And look, AI is basically a junior developer. And what do you have to do with a junior developer? You need to give them very specific instructions, right? And it's the same thing here, right? So a lot of times, I will get pretty detailed and say how you use a skill. Sometimes I'll even tell it to use a specific instruction just to be sure it's going to use that, even though it's got that information in there. So let's just, because the next demo takes a little bit longer, so I want to go ahead and get into that. So now gets into the part that I really like. So again, we've seen Copilot, we've seen these agents, we've seen the different models, we've seen skills, we've seen instructions. What if I need to be able to get more experts working on something together, right? Because the problem with one agent is one, context window limits. So again, in Visual Studio Code, or not Visual Studio Code, in GitHub Copilot, I'm limited to 200,000 K. I always say that 200,000 tokens that I can put in my request. What exactly does that mean? It actually kind of depends. It's still quite a bit. All the Claude Code fans will tell you, hey, we can do 1 million. Yes, you can, but you'll pay for that, right? But so we've got these limits, right? And long tasks can lose information, especially when you get to further and further down a thing. I have a single perspective, right? Here it says can't lead and should say can't lead and develop. But it can't be a lead, it can't also be a developer at the same time, effectively, right? Actually, it will try to do some of that stuff, right? But it's definitely sequential, right? Because no matter what, if it's going to do context switching within that prompt, it's gonna do one thing at a time, right? Even though we can maybe parallelize that work out there. Okay, so Squad basically gives me an orchestrated team, right? So I mentioned earlier on that GitHub Copilot itself is an orchestrator. It's actually already making decisions, especially if we go back into Visual Studio Code real quick, one of the options I really do like is the auto, right? And in auto, GitHub is actually looking at and thank you for the updates. I thought I closed things. Anyway, auto is really nice, one, because I get a 10% discount, but also it's actually using smarts, right? It's looking at what you're asking, and it will say, oh, GPT-4 is probably good for that, right? Because you're doing just simple automation. Oh, you're asking a hard programming question. We'll go to Opus, right? Because Opus is known for being really good at those kind of things. But with Squad, again, we're kind of getting more orchestration within these agents, right? So here, an example, I've got a lead, a backend, a front end, and a tester, and I'm using those agent files, and they're making those very specialized, right? So the lead's got information about what it means to be a lead. The backend, to do the real code and everything. How many front end developers do we have? Good, I can rag on all front end developers as much as I want. I always joke, I can't do it. That's the reason why I joke, right? Actually, I can do it now. I have AI, right? But that's kind of what we're talking about here. So I'm just going to get into this because I think this gets shown a little bit more when you see it. So first off, real quick, this is the repo for it, right? Again, we can see it hasn't been around. It's only been around for a couple months. There is no cost for Squad. It's an open source project. It's actually a mix of text files because of agents and so forth, and TypeScript because they're doing some coordination within TypeScript. So if we were to go in here, get back to my terminal. So let me exit out here. Let me verify. Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna go into Copilot. Yeah, we're gonna do YOLO. Oh, I actually forgot an important step. Before I do that, I have to actually initialize Squad. So I've already installed Squad. It gets installed through npm. It's a simple. You simply do. I'm looking for the command here. npm install -ge Brady Gaster and Squad CLI. It's right there on the homepage of that. But I've already installed it here on my machine, so I don't need to install it again. It doesn't hurt to reinstall it to actually install the newest version. But here we can go ahead and I'm going to do Squad init. All right, so this is going to go in here. And now it's going to add a bunch of files in here. So it's setting up everything. And if I was to look in the folder, we can see that it is now, I've got my Copilot directory in there, but more importantly, we've got our squad folder. So I've got agents, coding, or casting, decisions, and so forth. And I'm going to go more deep in that, but I want to get part of this demo started here. So now we go back to Copilot. And note, because I forgot to put in the thing, but I can now tell it agent, I can select Squad. You actually couldn't put that in the, when you open up Copilot. That's actually normal that I do. But now I can go up here and I can start doing things, right? So we can come down to where I got my prompt. So let's say we want to build a to-do app, because what's a demo without building a to-do app? So here you can see, I'm starting a new project to build a task management app using C#, .NET 10, Blazor, and SQLite. I want a 3-agent team, lead, developer, and tester. Use names from Silicon Valley. So anyone know the Silicon Valley TV show? Finally, people who actually have heard of the show before. If you have not heard of it, and if you're not easily offended, it is definitely well worth a watch. I actually just finished rewatching it.
It's a good watch, yes.
But again, if you're not easily offended.
It's not that bad.
Okay, talk about how they figured out how to do middle out compression.
Middle out gets pretty bad.
So 2 weeks ago, I was doing this presentation at work. And of course, so the funny part at work is I've got 4 development teams. One is a separate team. They are a development team, but they're a little bit different. But of the 3 main teams we've got, the old man on all 3 is 27. So when I make movie references, I just go right over them. Yeah, they didn't know Silicon Valley. Yeah, it was sad. It was funny because I purposely, you don't have to tell what universe to use. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and click on this. You can, because it will choose for you, because it will use some smarts to actually look at what you're trying to do. So like, for example, I was setting up one to help me on my, I've set up one for my SQL Server temporal table presentation, and it literally picked up a backward future. But all right, so it's done all this stuff. And again, everyone saw some things, right? So we can see it's gonna set up Jared, Guilford, Dinesh, right?
What's Dinesh's
So mad at that.
So it's funny. This is the second time in a row where I've seen it do Guilford and Dinesh as those 2 roles. This time it picked Jared as a lead. Last time it did Richard. So it's, again, interesting what you'll see. But also notice, again, I get a lot of information it was doing here. That implies pressure function without being too obvious, right? It's interesting to read some of the things it will do. I'm actually just curious. See, why not have Jack Barker for any of those things? But anyway, we're going to go ahead and hire the team, because actually this takes a couple more minutes. So at this point, it's now initializing everything. And like I talked about all those folders, this is where it's actually starting to populate those folders. And sometimes this takes a couple minutes, sometimes this takes about a minute. And I will say, notice that I could have added other users or remove a user, right? So it's interesting. A lot of times what I'll do with these when I set up new teams, I'll give it, this time I told it specifically because I want something a little bit more solid for a demo. But a lot of times I won't tell it what team members I want. And now I let it see what it comes up with. Because sometimes it comes up with some interesting suggestions. I'm literally stalling for this part to come up.
Sure. I'm curious, what are those silents?
Oh.
It had like silent and monitor next to 2 of the agents.
Oh, scribe and yeah. So thank you for saying that. So it's scribe and Ralph. All right. So scribe is exactly what it sounds like. It's the scribe. It's writing the files and so forth, and it's quote unquote silent. Actually, you will see it. I don't know why it says silent, but it's writing down things. Ralph. We're not going to use Ralph tonight, but Ralph, the whole idea is I can actually give it a list of tasks to do, and it'll do a Ralph loop. And if you know Simpsons, which
Ralph Wiggum.
Yes,
Wiggum.
It is a Ralph Wiggum. Computer people have funny senses of humor.
My friend told me about that about a month ago, and I was like, what? Oh, I got it.
And so there you go. So we've got everything set up. Notice it even gives me suggestions, right? Jared set up the project structure. See, I don't want Jared setting up the project structure, right? It's interesting the names picked. So, I'm going to go ahead and feed it the next prompt, and then we're going to talk about all the files that it's already created. So one of the things I've already done in here, if I go in here, so I've written what's called a PRD, product requirements document. And so I've given it, and here's where I talk about, like, I'll give it good sized prompts, right? I've actually defined what I want it to build, right? Given an overview, a problem statement, goals, objectives, who my target users are, functional requirements, technical requirements, constraints, definition of done, right? So what are we looking for it to do, right? So, I could just say, hey, go build a to-do app, and it actually will do a decent job. But with this, I'm giving even more details. And so in my prompt, I'll tell it, oh, you know what? I've also realized, well, I found out I can move my cursor, but too late now. It doesn't do good of selecting something. I realize I forgot to change this again. This should just be. So, all right. Again, I'm going to tell it to read the PRD MD, use that as a source of truth, build a simple app. So again, provide a little more information as to what we're going to do. And then notice that, after the decomposal work, show me the plan, right? And I do this a lot. I don't let AI just go run rampant, right? I love when you hear these people say, oh, I don't know how to do any software development, but I wrote these, massive applications, and I didn't give any information. I want to know everything it's doing. Or not everything, but I want to know a good deal of what it's doing. So I'm going to let that go. And while that's starting, actually, let's go to this tool. So this is just Typora. It's a nice markdown tool that I like to use. So I was talking about all the things it created. So one, like it created my agent. So like if I was to look at Jared, I've got his charter. And so we're seeing some details here, right? So he's the lead, it's got the universe and stuff. But more importantly, you own the project's vision and boundaries. Before work begins, you evaluate the scope and so forth. So it's providing good information, right? It's got context of what to know about, right? It's got the team and so forth. Notice that right now, learnings is empty, right? Because it hasn't learned anything yet. But this is one of the big deals that Squad really has in. It's documenting things as we go, all right? Again, if I was to look at GIF form, it's interesting. It did not write as much as it usually does. Again, the interesting part about doing AI demos. But again, you'll see some of the stuff. It's curious because some of the times, it actually will write, what? Not even 100, so it should. Yeah, usually we'll write more details. Like a lot of times it'll write like its attitude about things. And so, like sometimes I'll go in there and I'll change them around, right? It'll say, oh, it'll do this stuff. And I'll tell the lead to be confrontational, right? To probe my prompts, right? And actually figure out, is that the right thing to do? Right, this is still analyzing that PRD. But we can also see things in here, again, right now it'll be empty, but like decisions. Unfortunately, there's no decision to show yet. But this is where this gets really interesting, because as it's doing things and it's making decisions about, so in a couple minutes we'll see that where it's populating that folder. And because it learns from that, it keeps track of all those decisions. And this is where this gets really different than just using a regular agent, right? Because not only am I using a team of agents, but I'm also recording more into here. And more importantly, while you had that in your session windows, but you had that, this again goes in the repo. So when I check in this repo, right, another person picks up the repo, they also get the benefits of all. Yes?
How does your token burn compare to if you're just doing this as like a single agent?
So you will, okay, I need to figure that out because that just happened the other day and my account still hasn't been changed. I'm still using premium requests. In my corporate account, which is where I do a lot more work, with Copilot, is still premium request. But one of the big benefits with the premium request, I don't really care about the tokens.
Right. I wonder, like, do you have 3 separate, what would you call, like, processes essentially spun on their own?
You will see that so we're going to look at this plan right now, and you'll see it will spin up multiple agents. And you'll see those running. So so we can see, right, again, it took my PRD, notice it wrote work items, right? So here's all the work items it's going to do. Notice that it's seeing parallel opportunities. It's saying that 4, 5, and 6 can, no, those are independent once surface layer is done. But also notice, I saw it here, yeah, so if approved, Guilfoyle starts work item 1, Dinesh reviews testing strategy and spikes in parallel, right? So it's going to fire off multiple agents in here, right? So I'm going to say, I'll say no changes, move forward, or let me just, I'll just say spawn the team. To start building. So we'll give it a second to see what it'll do here. So there you go. Now it's saying, it's looking at the work breakdown. Notice, actually, let me reconsider, right? It's because it's going to look at critical paths. And there we go. So it's spawning the team now. I'm just waiting here another second for it to start up. Because we'll come back to those because I should now have. No, it hasn't written the decisions yet because it will have some decisions. It just hasn't written them down yet. Okay, there we go. So now notice at the bottom here it says 3 background tasks. And sure enough, if I load it up there, and there we go. Now it's recording decisions. So we can see, Guilfoyle is setting up the project. Dinesh is setting up the test infrastructure. The scribe is logging the plan and recording decisions. So we can see these, and then of course those are counting up how long those have been working. Also notice, so in here, so Guilfoyle is using Sonnet, Dinesh is using Sonnet, and then Scribe is using Haiku. And a lot of that actually, again, comes back from, if we were to go back into their charters, we see Guilfoyle by default, that's their preferred. But notice it does say preferred, right? If we were to give Guilfoyle a more computative task, the agent squad will say, "Hey, spin you up as opens," because that would make more sense, right? Oops. We may or may not see that in this demo. It all really depends. So scribe is done. So now, again, we can go in here. So there we're getting their decision. So the work plan, right? And again, like I say, these are all being documented. So I'm gonna let that run. I'm gonna talk about some more slides, and then again, we'll see how quickly things run. So like I said, in here that's not very readable, but we have the lead, the backer, the tester. In this example, it was Jared, Guilfoyle, and Dinesh, right? And again, so we saw the broken requirements in the task, right? Guilfoyle is writing clean tested code, designing REST APIs and so forth, right? The tester is validating, it's implementing, write unit tests, report failures. The important part is all the handoffs, right? So we started seeing that, right? And again, in our example, it was Jared. So Jared created a task, and then he assigned that to the developer, who's writing the code, who then forwards over the task over to the tester, who then will give it back to the lead for feedback. And again, this is all iterative, and this is all parallel, right? It's not, so in theory, it's happening a little bit faster. I don't know how much more faster it really is, but it is definitely doing better quality, right? That's where we're really getting the big benefit. Where you really see is when, well, I have learned you can only fire off so many agents at one time. I forget what the number is, but I have hit it. But that's where you start seeing some real progress, right? I've seen where like say, where I brainstorm for a couple hours, and I say, okay, now let's take all this, now let's generate this process flow document with these diagrams, and so I've got multiple, like I have an expert that's an expert who knows how to write that process flow. I've got another expert who understands how to write good API contracts. I have another expert. The only thing they do is write mermaid diagrams and make sure that they look nice and all that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of things we can do in here. And again, the agents are passing this, and so we're eliminating that bottleneck. So let's see where we're at on this. So it is still working. We're down to one background task now. So so Guilford is done. Well, he's done with the first couple tasks. So Dinesh is still spiking to do his infrastructure. Again, the hardest part about doing these demos is every single time it's going to do it slightly different.
Are there changes in your work tree right now?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So if I was to open that one up. So here we go, we're in here. So one, we see task manager, we see task manager test, all right? So you can see that, they've actually done quite a bit. All right, they've set up their components, they've set up, their razor files are in here. Their routes are set up.
Yes, 49.
We can see in here that we've got, test fixtures that are set up. He's already setting up a test for the task service. So yes, because all along it's doing some work. Now I will say sometimes it'll do a lot of stuff in memory and then write out. It depends on what it's doing. Okay, this is so. See, that's what I like. Now it'll ask me. So I'm going to say, how many phases did it say it was going to do? 5 stages, for heaven's sakes. Proceed and build out all of the phases. Do not prompt me in between. Give a very definitive answer there. And hopefully this kind of goes a little faster. But, so that's kind of what we're seeing with that. And again, I'm going to let that spin for a little bit. And hopefully we're going to see how well it does this. And I will say, though, I built this demo, probably a dozen times by now. Every single time it looks different. There'll be a lot of similarities. Interesting enough, every single time it seems to get better, which is really interesting. I'm going to tell you what, I don't know what they're doing, but they definitely know what you've done before, on your own machine. Because I see things, I'm like, oh, you had to know what I did. Yeah, a little bit more than 5 minutes, but so it broke down the requirements. Again, we got that code implementation, test and validation, and again, the lead is will eventually say that was done, right? And again, it's not really 5 minutes, but we'll check here in another moment to see if it got through that. So the answer is, when to use Squad. So, now let me say, if you don't already have Squad stood up, the first 2, you're probably not going to use Squad, right? A quick fix or a single file edit, right? Because you notice I had to set up a team, I had to wait for them to make decisions and so forth. And I can do that a whole lot faster just doing simple prompts, all right? But when I need to do things like a multi-feature or multi-file feature, a large project, cross-cutting concerns, team scale problems, right? That's where this makes sense. And again, once you've set up, once you determine you need Squad, continue to use it for as you go. And as I've kind of been alluding to, not necessarily just for your coding projects, all right? You can use it for things like writing documentation, helping with brainstorming, right? So if I was to, let me me show you something. I'm gonna first open up because I'm gonna go to work stuff. Oh my goodness, I actually didn't have to do an MFA. I'm surprised. No, that's fine. But just to give you an example, so like I said, so here's a squad that I've been using to help me with designing documentation. And again, so Desmond is my visual architect and diagramming specialist. Hurley is my feature intake and requirements analyst. Jack is my lead system architect. Kate is my business context and user journey. If you can't tell, squad picked lost. Yes, because I didn't tell them what universe to pick. I've got an infrastructure architect. I've got my Ralph. I've got my Syed is my API and event contract engineer. Right. Now I'm not going to show you what I actually generated with that because but again, just the idea we can have different teams doing different things. We'll see where this is at. So it's still building. So it has already spawned 3 through 5. So it's okay, good. So it's going to spawn 3 through 5 in parallel, right? It's going to do things a little bit faster. I think for next time I'm going to tell it, don't spin up so many phases. Do it quicker. Yeah, so this kind of reiterates what I was talking about, though, right? So quick fixes and such can be overkill. Again, if you don't already have a squad stood up, and so forth. But as I was already mentioned, squad is not necessarily faster than Copilot, all right? Other than the fact I do have agents working in parallel, all right? Especially when they can. Not always can they, right? But when they can. So that will speed some things up. But the more important part is that orchestrated collaboration. The fact that it is working with each other. You will see, I don't know if we can see any examples of this right now. No, because it's not reporting as much. But you'll see sometimes where, I've seen it where literally it's arguing, the two different agents are arguing with each other, right? Which actually would be kind of funny with this one since Guilfoyle, again, if you don't know the show, Guilfoyle and Nash they're best friends, but they always argue with each other. But the big part, each agent has got its bound context, right? I've got that backend developer, I've got that tester, right? I've got that lead, right? Or again, I've got the API designer, right? So we're given it a clear mission. And I was talking about, the like in Copilot, you only have a 200K, content window. Let's get around that, right? Because it will literally spin up multiple agents and give it. Sometimes I will spawn up multiple of the same agent, so that it can take bits and pieces of what it needs in that content. Bless you. And then and as I was alluding to earlier, right? Basically, I mean, the biggest thing is I get more quality, right? Because again, we're giving experts to do what they can do the best, right? So, and again, the more complex of a thing you need, the more team members you should have, right? So again, when I'm talking about designing a large microservice system, it makes sense to have a bunch of agents. In here, what this is building is not that complex. We can see that they're still running things. So with that, I mean, how to get started? I say start playing with this, right? So, so I learned about this. It was like February 27th, 28th, whatever the final Friday of February is. That's when I learned about Squad. I literally, so for those who know me, I go to a lot of events, but I can only handle so much social activity, right? And they found I was at like every single night was a party. And by the final night, I was like, I'm done with parties. But I just learned about this. I went back to my room because like I had a late afternoon or late morning flight. And I was up till like 2, just just plugging away, just trying things, right? Let me try to create this. Let me try to create that. My whole flight home, I was just playing with this thing, right? Because this is really cool, learning what you can do with this. And a lot of it is, it's like I've been telling people for a long time, just build things. Don't worry about whether you throw it away or not. With that being said, obviously we pay for for all these things, and you got to be a little bit careful with your tokens and so forth. But tokens do refresh.
So I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Have you played around with this for a monolith to see how well it handles something like that, where a seemingly mundane change can lead to catastrophic consequences?
I have not. Yeah, I really haven't. Just because, again, my thing is microservices, right? So that's mostly what I'm building is more of those kind of things. But whether it be squad or just agents in general, right? That's kind of where you can get it, because tell it, hey, look for those kind of things, watch out for those things. A lot of times, just by nature, they'll watch out for those things.
I'm just curious because that's primarily one of our services, systems that we have is a monolith that I've been playing around with trying to get Copilot to just understand the end-to-end for what my entire team considers a fairly simple process flow, but we've seen it just do some horrific stuff, partially based off of our own architecture on a 13-year-old app, but also partially just because it's like, I think this should go here, and it just crushes everything.
So you got my curiosity. So like if we went to...
See if there's a monolith.
Yes.
Seems like there should be.
We don't want it.
There's not an agent per se. But, again, that's what I was, again, they're just text files, right? And write that up. A lot of times I will do that. I will get another agent and then I'll customize it for my needs. Prime example, and there's a bunch of them here, like the Terraform ones. Let's see here. Find the one that not that one. Oops. But anyway, I took one of these, just say it was this one. It wasn't this one, but I actually took that because this was the one I was using was a good example. But then I added more things that was customized for way how we are doing things. Because that's actually one of the main things I'm working on right now is so we're building this large manufacturing ERP system. And every service is basically the same thing. It's a Azure Container app, a function app, and either Cosmos or table storage, right? At least infrastructure-wise. And it takes my DevOps folks a couple days to write those things, get them all written up. I'm like, yeah, that's a waste of time. So I'm actually working on this right now with an agent and then customizing it for how we want to build things. So it is getting close, because it's saying it's working on 8 through 10. There were 11 steps. Many other questions while I stall more to see what this built.
Well, when you were showing the team that you put together, the squad you're doing work with, and it's all a bunch of markdown files. How much of that did you write versus what it just assembled for you when you described what you wanted?
So the ones I was showing you, I don't want to go too much into detail on what's on there because
right, just generally.
But it actually, like I said, it wrote up more restrictions than what it did there. But I went in there and I tweaked several things. For example, and I already mentioned this, but like on my lead, I told it to challenge me, right? I told it to be confrontational on its responses because I wanted, again, I'm building an architecture that I got to hand off to other people, right? And I'm quote unquote smart, but you know what? I make a lot of mistakes too, right? And which another trick. As we put in these agents, put in adversarial agents, right? Have one agent, using one model, another agent, so have one using Claude, have another one using Codex or what have you. Actually, Codex seems to be gone now. I know it's still there in the business accounts. But doing that kind of stuff really helps.
Actually, you were able to just keep a lot of what it created for you and just make a few changes.
And most people never touch them, right?
To,
from what I've seen. Right?
Drive it in a certain direction.
But again, I'm also very picky, so I do go through them and read through them. I was going to say one of the things, you have to turn on experimental mode, which literally I do experimental on. And, well, did I type that right?
Experimental.
It's an experimental spelling.
I don't, well, it's not going to work because it's the middle of things. But one of the things they just, like last weekend, it's still experimental, is the rubber duck. And so what it will do is, especially when you ask it more complex things, right? And especially when it goes to Claude, Sonnet, or Opus, it will actually send it over to GGPT to say, hey, GGPT, look at this response and analyze it, see if it was a good response. And what they say is they're finding that it's like a 15%, I think it was. It wasn't a large percentage improvement, but at the same rate, that's an improvement. All right, and as long as they stay on the premium request model, it's all still in the same request also. So that's one of the other big benefits there. Who's still working?
So I have a question. So my company is Pro AI Adoption.
Mm-hmm.
We've hit our limits, like in terms of the whole company. Has anybody seen that, or?
So now you're talking on GitHub Copilot?
GitHub Copilot, but also just general usage. Like basically, and it's because people were choosing, I think probably 5.4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious because I'm trying to like navigate this whole thing.
So has this been the last couple of weeks or longer than that?
Pretty much the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so sure enough, the last couple of weeks, both GitHub and Claude or Anthropic in particular have been seeing outages, all right? Which is the reason why, again, I knew this pricing model was going to change.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to happen that fast, right? Because they literally get sometime in the near future. Yeah. And then, but there's been outages for both companies. So that's a lot of the reasons, right? One of the things I've been seeing a lot, actually, it seems to calm down in the past week. But I was seeing for several weeks where I would hit rate limits on my request. Mm-hmm. And it would just retry. I mean, it was smart enough to go retry. Sometimes it would retry several times, and then eventually be like, I can't retry anymore, right? And then I just say, hey, spawn off again. Actually, a lot of times I would tell Squad, hey, break this down into smaller tasks, right? So I will say, and again, be careful what I say. There are more changes coming to the pricing stuff. And for corporations, I think they're really good changes. People are going to complain, I will tell you that. But they are doing some things that are going to be really nice. It's because here's the thing: we all know, basically, it's going to be more of a bucket, right? So you're going to have, because we all know, you got those people who are doing a lot of stuff with AI. You got people who are doing just a little bit, and Microsoft's looking at that, and GitHub is looking at that, and they're. All I can say is they are going to do some things that are going to be really nice. All right. So this did get started, or this did, so let me, go into the repo. So there we go, we've got that running, so we'll do .NET run. Oh.
Just like a real dev.
Yes.
Wow.
Works on my machine.
So it's interesting.
Already in use.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Oh, did it already start? How long has it been?
Yeah, it started it up for you to look at.
Yeah, I've seen it do that.
So I'll tell you what to do, and then I'll just do it.
Well, there you go.
See, this app is production ready. Do you see that line there? This app is production ready.
Yeah.
It's like a production app.
But it was interesting because it said
Close the counter.
it's production to run it. Go to CD. I even copied it, so I didn't type it wrong, right? And there you go. So we got a task manager. So here's one which shows interesting. So we see what it did, right? Notice some things, right?
Yep.
Still got the blazer stuff, still got the counter, the weather. Again, what I love about AI.
Was that in your instructions to not leave that? Wasn't it?
I think I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it on something. I didn't know.
I was
if it
pretty sure I did.
This off.
Because I was going to say, so it's just to show you something. I need to go another folder down. Now, run. Because here's the exact same prompt. Same, well, I did use Richard instead of Jared. But I gotta wonder, right? But exact same prompt, right? I didn't change anything. And where is my local host?
5224.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. That's significantly
Very
different.
different.
Yeah. Again, same prompts.
No decorative nonsense.
Yep.
That's what it says. No decorative
I
nonsense.
didn't even notice that the first time.
I've had some interesting things in workshops with clients.
Yeah. But, so no, I mean, that squad, again, like I said, it took about 10 minutes, I guess, maybe a little, 12 minutes, maybe. And we had a nap. Yes.
On that topic, I've actually used like AI to give me a wireframe first and said like make it look like this styling or whatever else to help guide it to whatever you're intended.
And again, I was trying to give it a little more simpler so that it could process it within a reasonable amount of time. I mean, like I said, every single time. Well, it's funny because so the one that it's doing now is more like what I was seeing earlier on before I added in, hey, don't remove those things.
Have you found any instances of, I want to call them squad archetypes that you personally felt like really, really nailed the role that you wanted it for, so you'll cherry pick them and use and like purposefully insert them into other squads later on?
Yes, because that's actually, so part of what I'm working on right now, actually at work, is building up those definitive agents that we want to use. So very much like very much like we see on this awesome library, right? I'm doing the exact same kind of thing, right? So that we can build teams that are specific for that repo, but use agents that we've used. We're also, I've been playing around with how to cherry pick decisions, so that again I'm giving it some more knowledge. Importing it's lessons learned, right? So.
So I mean, going so far as like taking one of these and actually ripping their
that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's actually what I'm working on right now. Right, it's one of the I've never worked on one thing, but so again, because we can see now it's done some things. We can see what it's learned, right? And it will clean this up as it goes, right? Because as you keep on, it's not going to write this humongous massive file because then it gets too unusable, right? But it does a good job with these things. But also, I can insert things in here, right? I can give it warnings, and it will generally work. Any other questions? Awesome, like I say, that's Squad, and generally what I found is once you start using it, you get hooked with it. It's it's just kind of really cool to see what you can do with it. Thanks.
All right.